their scales glistening in the dim light. They hissed and slithered towards her, their forked tongues flicking the air. In extreme fear, Omaomi's world went black. She passed out, her body lying motionless. Queen Beni's men entered the forest, their machetes drawn. As they pushed through the undergrowth, the claw-like branches of the trees lashed out at them, scratching and tearing at their flesh. The men fought back, hacking at the branches with their blades, but this only enraged the forest. The trees groaned and creaked as if alive, their roots pulling free from the ground. The forest swallowed the men whole, dragging them into the earth. Their screams echoed for a moment before silence fell, and all that remained were the rustling leaves. Back at the palace, the horses returned without their riders. Their eyes were wide with fear, and strange leaves clung to their manes, leaves known to belong to the forest of the dead. When Segun saw the horses, dread filled his heart. He marched into Queen Beni's chambers, his face pale.
"The men are dead,"
he said grimly.
"Omaomi is likely dead too in the forest of the dead."
Queen Beni's eyes blazed with fury. She rose from her throne, her voice like thunder. "I don't care if she's dead or alive in that forest," she screamed. "Just get me her heart, Segun." Segun hesitated.
"But how, my queen? Anyone who goes into that forest never comes out alive."
Queen Beni's eyes narrowed, glowing red with rage. She stepped closer to Segun, her voice a deadly whisper. "Then get me someone who knows the forest." Segun bowed low and hurried out of the room, his mind racing. He knew the queen's wrath was not something to be taken lightly, but he also knew that failure was not an option. Igobi, the best hunter in all of Oro, was returning from the bush after a successful hunt. The sun was setting behind him, casting long shadows as he carried a heavy antelope over his shoulders. His mind was still clouded with grief. His beloved mother had passed away just 2 days ago, and no victory in the wild could ease the pain in his heart. As they approached the village, Segun suddenly stepped into his path, blocking the way.
"The queen requests your presence at the palace, now."
Segun commanded, his voice cold and firm. Igobi frowned and tried to walk past him, uninterested in royal summons, but Segun grabbed him roughly by the arm, his grip like iron.
"You have no choice, hunter,"
he snarled, dragging Igobi towards the palace. Igobi found himself kneeling before Queen Beni. Her piercing eyes stared down at him, her beauty both mesmerizing and terrifying. "I have heard stories about you, Igobi," she said smoothly, her voice like honey, laced with venom. "They say you are the best hunter in all the land." Igobi remained silent, his jaw clenched. "I need your skills," the queen continued. "I want you to hunt down a girl." At her words, Igobi's heart sank.
"I'm a hunter of animals, not people,"
he replied, his voice steady.
"I will not do your bidding."
Beni's eyes narrowed, but instead of flashing out, she smiled, a cold, calculating smile. "If you bring her to me," she whispered, leaning closer, "I will not only reward you handsomely, I will bring your dead mother back to life." Igobi's eyes widened, and then he laughed bitterly.
"How is that even possible?"
Without a word, Queen Beni signaled to Segun. Segun raised his bow and fired an arrow at one of the palace guards. The arrow struck true, and the guard collapsed to the floor, dead. Gasps echoed through the hall, but Queen Beni remained calm. She walked gracefully to the lifeless body, her hands glowing faintly. She whispered ancient forbidden words, words of dark magic. Before Igobi's astonished eyes, the dead guard's body began to twitch. Slowly, the man opened his eyes and stood up, alive and whole, as if death had never touched him. The hall felt silent. Even Segun looked uneasy. Igobi's heart pounded. The pain of losing his mother was still fresh, and this temptation was too great. He looked into Queen Beni's cold, expectant eyes.
"I'll do it,"
he whispered.
"I'll bring the girl to you."
But deep down, Igobi knew he had to be careful. He wasn't just hunting for a reward. He was walking into a web of darkness, and the price of failure could be more than he bargained for. Igobi ventured into the forest of the dead, his heart heavy with the task ahead. Behind him, Segun followed closely, his eyes gleaming with hidden intentions. Queen Beni had given him a secret order. The moment Igobi found the girl, Segun was to get rid of him. The forest whispered around them, its eerie silence broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. As they moved deeper, the trees began to shift, their claw-like branches stretching toward the door, as if the forest itself wanted to claim them. Segun, sensing danger, drew his machete, ready to strike.
Don't!
Igobi said firmly, grabbing Segun's arms.
These are not real. The forest feeds on your fears.
Segun hesitated, his grip on the machete tightening, but something in Igobi's calm voice made him reconsider. Slowly, he put the weapon away, following Igobi's lead as they pressed on. As they walked, the forest seemed to settle, the branches retreating as if acknowledging Igobi. The path cleared, and soon they found Omomi lying motionless on the ground, her face pale, her body still. Igobi rushed to her side, carefully lifting her into his arms, but as he turned to face Segun, he froze. Segun was pointing his sword directly at him.
Give me the girl.
Segun demanded, his voice cold and sharp. Igobi's eyes narrowed.
But this wasn't the plan. What about the deal with the queen?
Segun scoffed. A cruel smile spread across his face.
There's no deal, you fool. The queen only needs this girl's heart. Now, give her to me.
Realizing the betrayal, Igobi gently laid Omomi on the ground and faced Segun, ready for a fight. The two men lunged at each other, their blades clashing under the dark canopy of the forest. But Igobi, who understood the forest's secrets, fought with more than just strength. As they struggled, he maneuvered Segun toward a patch of thick, dark mud. With a sudden push, Igobi shoved Segun into the mud. Immediately, ghostly hands erupted from the ground, grabbing at Segun's arms and legs. Terrified, Segun pulled a dagger from his pocket and slashed at the hands, but this only enraged the forest. The ghostly hands morphed into writhing snakes that struck Segun with venomous bites. His screams echoed through the forest as the snakes coiled tighter, pulling him deeper into the mud. He struggled, but the forest showed no mercy. With one final anguished cry, Segun was swallowed whole by the earth. Back at the palace, Queen Beni stood before her enchanted mirror Igbaje. Suddenly, she felt a violent surge of energy rip through her. She clutched her chest and fell to the ground, her face twisted in agony. She knew it. Her brother was dead. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "I'm sorry, brother. I will avenge your death." But as the grief consumed her, her flawless beauty began to fade. Wrinkles crept across her skin, her hair thinned, and her face twisted into that of an old woman. She knew she had to act fast. Back in the forest, Igobi wiped the sweat from his brow. He carefully lifted the unconscious Omomi once more. Now that he knew the queen's true intentions, he couldn't let her fall into Beni's hands. Determined, he carried Omomi deeper into the forest, heading toward another land. A land where the queen's dark magic couldn't reach them. So he thought. Igobi eventually emerged from the forest of the dead, carrying Omomi on his arms. As he stepped out of the dark, twisted trees, he found himself in a strange, mystical land. Unlike anything he had ever seen, the land sparkled with vibrant colors. Tiny fairies with shimmering wings flitted through the air, leaving trails of glittering light behind them. The trees were lush and full, their leaves glowing softly in the magical atmosphere. Igobi gently laid Omomi down on the soft grass and ventured into a nearby bush, searching for herbs that might revive her. His heart was heavy with worry, but he was determined to save her. While he was away, the curious fairies hovered over Omomi, their tiny hands brushing against her face. Their touch was light and warm, and slowly Omomi stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and she gasped at the sight of the strange, beautiful land around her. She sat up quickly, her heart racing with confusion and fear. Just then, Igobi returned, holding a handful of herbs. When Omomi saw him, her fear surged. She scrambled to her feet, ready to run. But Igobi was faster. He caught her by the arm. Leave me alone, Omaomi cried, struggling to break free.
Just stop!
Igobi scolded softly. I am not the evil one here. Omaomi's breathing slowed and she stopped struggling. Seeing her calm, Igobi sat down beside her and told her everything. How Queen Beni had sent him to capture her, but how he had chosen instead to save her. Tears welled up in Omaomi's eyes. But why does she want my heart? She whispered. Igobi sighed. I can't say for sure, but back in Oro, young maidens your age are captured and never come back. I guess she uses their hearts for some kind of ritual. Omaomi shuddered, wiping her tears. Igobi stood up and offered her his hand. We have to keep moving before the queen finds us, he said. Omaomi nodded and took his hand. Together, they headed deeper into the mystical land, their steps cautious but determined. As they walked through the enchanted forest, they suddenly triggered a hidden trap. A large net shot up from the ground, entangling them and hoisting them into the air. Omaomi let out a loud cry as they dangled helplessly above the ground. Immediately, 7 dwarfs jumped out of their hiding places, their eyes gleaming with curiosity and mischief as they looked up at their unsuspected catch. The leader of the dwarfs, a stout figure, stepped forward.
Who are you? And what brings you to our land?
He demanded. Igobi struggled in the net but managed to respond.
We are mere travelers. We mean no harm.
The dwarfs laughed heartily.
You giants always bring trouble.
The leader said,
We will eat you for our dinner.
No! Omaomi cried, her voice desperate. I am Omaomi, the daughter of King Adisa of Oro. You wouldn't want to eat royal blood, would you? The dwarfs exchanged glances, murmuring among themselves. Then, one of them, Aremu the blind, stepped forward. Though his eyes were blind, his voice was sure.
She's telling the truth,
Aremu said confidently. The dwarfs fell silent. Without another word, they quickly cut down the net. Igobi and Omaomi tumbled to the ground, gasping for breath. Then, to Igobi's surprise, the dwarfs bowed deeply before Omaomi. Long live your majesty, the chorused. It was in that moment that Igobi fully understood who Omaomi truly was. Not just a girl he had saved, but a princess destined for something far greater. The dwarfs welcomed Igobi and Omaomi into their hidden palace, deep within the mystical land. The palace, though small, was warm and filled with the comforting scent of herbs and freshly cooked soup. Omaomi and Igobi were fed heartily and their wounds were tended with care. Later that evening, they all gathered around the fire, the flames casting flickering shadows on the walls. Aremu the blind, the wisest of the dwarfs, cleared his throat and began to speak.
We are overjoyed to see you alive, Princess Omaomi,
he said, his blind eyes turned toward her as though he could see her spirit.
Everyone in the kingdom of Oro thought you were dead. We pray to the Orisha for a savior.
The dwarfs nodded in agreement, their faces serious.
Thanks be to Orisha,
Aremu continued.
but your journey is not over. You both should rest tonight. Greater battles await you. The kingdom of Oro must be reclaimed.
After the meeting, they all retreated to their rooms. Back in the kingdom of Oro, Queen Beni stood before her enchanted mirror, having refreshed herself by eating the heart of another maiden. She stared into the mirror, her eyes sharp with suspicion. Igbaje, she whispered. Who is the most beautiful and powerful in all the lands? The mirror shimmered and spoke. You, Queen Beni, are the most powerful, but the most beautiful is in the land of the dwarfs. Queen Beni screamed, her voice echoing through the cold halls of the palace. Why is that child still alive? She shrieked. In a fury, she stormed out of the room and into her secret chamber. She donned a black cloak, her hands trembling with rage. Drawing a circle on the ground with white chalk, she began chanting ancient incantations. The room filled with dark energy as her form twisted and shifted. In moments, she transformed into a colony of bats and flew out of the palace, her mind set on finding Omaomi. Back in the enchanted land, the dwarfs prepared to go hunting in the forest. Igobi, eager to return to something familiar, offered to join them.
I have missed hunting, he
said with a smile. Before they left, Aremu turned to Omaomi.
Stay inside, princess,
he warned.
Do not open the door for anyone.
Omaomi nodded, grateful for their protection. While they were away, Omaomi sat by the window, playing with some small birds that perched on the sill. Their cheerful chirping filled the air, but suddenly they scattered and flew away, sensing something ominous. From the shadows near the hut, the colony of bats descended and formed into the shape of an old woman, Queen Beni in disguise. The old woman shuffled towards the hut, her back bent and her face hidden beneath a hood. When she saw Mommy by the window, she called out in a frail voice, "My child, could you spare some water for an old woman?" Mommy's heart softened with pity. She hurried inside and returned with a cup of water. The old woman drank it gratefully. "Thank you, my dear," she said, her voice dripping with false kindness. "For this act of kindness, I will give you something in return." Mommy smiled politely. "That's not necessary, ma." But the old woman insisted. She reached into her tattered bag and pulled out a shiny red apple. "Take this, my child," she said. "I plucked it fresh on my way here. It's my way of saying thank you." Mommy hesitated, but the woman's kind eyes and frail appearance disarmed her. Trusting her instincts, she accepted the apple and took a small bite. Almost immediately, she felt strange. Her vision blurred and her body weakened. The apple was poisoned. As Mommy collapsed, gasping for breath, the old woman straightened and began to transform. Her wrinkled face morphed into the cold, cruel visage of Queen Beni. With a wicked smile, the queen stretched her hand toward Mommy's chest, ready to claim the heart she had long desired. But just as her fingers grazed Mommy's skin, an arrow whizzed through the air and struck her hand. Queen Beni screamed in pain and fury. With a screech, she transformed back into a colony of bats and fled into the sky. Ikobi rushed to Omaomi's side, cradling her in his arms as her breathing grew faint. The dwarves returned moments later, their faces filled with shock and determination.
"We must save her,"
Aremu declared.
"for the future of Oro depends on her."
The dwarves tried everything they could to revive Amaomi, but the poison was too strong. Despite their best efforts, the princess, the daughter of King Adisa, took her final breath and lay still. The room grew silent as the realization sank in. The dwarves cried. Igobi cried. Though Amaomi had only been with them for a short while, her light had touched them all deeply. Her spirit, her kindness, and her courage had left an indelible mark on their hearts.
"Such a beautiful soul,"
whispered Iganga, the youngest dwarf, as he held her closely, his tiny hands trembling, but no amount of tears could bring her back to life. With heavy hearts, the dwarves made arrangements to bury her. As the dwarves laid Amaomi in state, they surrounded her, their hearts heavy with grief. They couldn't bring themselves to bury her. She was too pure, too beautiful. Instead, they began placing small parting gifts by her side, tokens of their love and respect. A golden leaf, a crystal stone, a small carved figure. Each dwarf left something special. Igobi was the last to step forward. He had nothing to offer but his heart. Kneeling beside her, he gently bent down and placed a soft kiss on her lips. As he pulled away, a miracle happened. Just as they were about to close the coffin, Amaomi sneezed.
"She's alive!"
Aremu screamed, his blind eyes filling with joyful tears. The dwarves rushed to her side, cheering and laughing through their tears. Igobi cradled her in his arms, overwhelmed with relief and happiness. Amaomi slowly opened her eyes, confused but alive. The warmth of their love had brought her back, and now the battle to reclaim the kingdom of Oro was far from over. Back in the kingdom of Oro, in her secret room, the bats descended and reformed into Queen Beni. She rushed to her enchanted mirror, her heart pounding with anticipation. "Igbaje," she whispered, "who is the most beautiful and powerful in all the lands?" The mirror shimmered, its voice smooth and clear. "You, Queen Beni, are the most beautiful and the most powerful in all the lands." Queen Beni burst into laughter, her voice echoing through the dark halls of her palace. She was ecstatic, believing that Amaomi was finally gone. But then the mirror spoke again. Oh, my queen, you are the most powerful, but the heart of the most beautiful still beats. The laughter died in Queen Beni's throat. Her eyes widened with rage. What nonsense! She screamed, picking up a heavy object and smashed the mirror into shards. Why can't she just die? Her voice echoed off the cold walls, but no answer came. With Omaomi now alive and strong, the dwarves knew there was no time to waste. They began preparing her for the final battle. They understood that Queen Beni would strike back with full force, and if they didn't act quickly, the kingdom of Oro would be lost forever. Igobi was a great help. He taught Omaomi how to wield a sword, how to shoot an arrow with precision, and the arts of hand-to-hand combat. It wasn't easy for Omaomi. Her muscles ached and her hands blistered from the rigorous training, but she knew her life and the lives of the people of Oro depended on her strength and courage. After 2 days of intense training, Omaomi was ready. Before she left, Aremu stepped forward and handed her a dagger.
The magic and power of the queen are useless against the dwarves,
he explained.
This here was forged with our blood. Use it wisely.
Omaomi accepted the dagger with gratitude, feeling its weight in her hand. The dwarves gathered around, hugging her tightly, their faces filled with hope and pride. They bid farewell to Omaomi and Igobi, their hearts heavy but determined. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Oro, Queen Beni sensed the impending threat. She demanded 3 virgin maidens from the villagers. Without mercy, she bathed in their blood, fortifying herself with dark magic. She knew the battle ahead would be her greatest yet. It was either she gained immortality from Omaomi's heart or lose everything. After a day's travel, Igobi and Omaomi arrived at the village of Oro. They went straight to the home of Deji, the kingdom's greatest warrior. When Deji saw them, his eyes widened in shock, but Igobi quickly motioned for him to remain silent. Once inside, Igobi explained everything: Queen Beni's betrayal, Omaomi's survival, and their plan to reclaim the kingdom. He asked Deji if he was willing to join the fight. Without hesitation, Deji agreed. Together, they gathered 10 loyal men who still believed in the true royal bloodline. They formed a small but fierce army and began devising their attack plan. After much discussion, they decided to strike the palace in 2 days. Queen Beni continued her fortification rituals, but what she didn't know was how the attack would come. In her rage, she had broken her enchanted mirror, leaving her blind to Omaomi's whereabouts. This gnawed at her, filling her with paranoia. Desperate for an advantage, she devised a new plan. She invoked 4 ravens, dark creatures of the night. She sent them to the 4 corners of the palace to keep watch. The ravens would notify her the moment they sensed Omaomi's presence. The night of the attack arrived. Igobi, knowing how the queen operated, suggested a clever strategy.
We go through the water,
he said.
Her magic won't detect us there.
The group agreed. Under the cover of darkness, Igobi, Omaomi, Deji, and the other men dived into the sea that wound its way around the palace. They swam silently, their bodies moving like shadows beneath the water's surface. After some time, they reached the palace's tunnel water outlets, hidden passages that led directly into the palace grounds. One by one, they climbed into the tunnels, their hearts pounding with anticipation. In no time, they were inside the palace, undetected and ready for battle. Tactically, Igobi and his men moved through the palace corridors, silently taking down Queen Beni's guards one by one. Their precise strikes left no room for alarm, and soon the path to the queen's chambers was clear. With a nod to his men, Igobi grabbed Omaomi by the hand, and together they sprinted towards the heart of the palace. Inside her lavish chambers, Queen Beni slept peacefully, unaware that her palace was under siege. Her dreams were filled with visions of power and immortality. Suddenly, the loud caw of the ravens she had stationed around the palace pierced the night. The birds flapped widely, gathering at her window. Queen Beni jolted awake, her heart racing. She rushed to the window, sensing danger, but it was too late. As she turned back from the window, She was met by the sight of Omomi and Igobi standing in her room, swords drawn and eyes burning with determination. The queen let out a loud, chilling laugh. "So you think you can kill me?" she sneered. "Thank you for bringing yourselves to me. Now I shall have both your hearts." In a fit of rage, Igobi charged at her, but Queen Beni merely stretched out her hand, and a surge of dark power shot from her fingertips, striking Igobi in the chest. He flew backward, crashing into the wall and falling unconscious. Amaomi's heart pounded as she realized she was now alone, but she stood firm, gripping her sword tightly. She knew she had to survive. For herself, for Igobi, and for the people of Oro. With a cry of defiance, Amaomi charged at the queen. Abeni raised her hand again, sending a wave of dark power toward Amaomi, but Amaomi deflected it with her sword. The clash of magic and steel echoed through the room. "Now, I see that you are prepared," Queen Beni snarled. The two women engaged in a fierce battle. Sparks flew as Amaomi's sword met Abeni's dark magic. The room shook with the force of their struggle. After what felt like hours, Amaomi's strength began to wane. Exhausted and breathing heavily, she fell to the ground. Queen Beni walked over to her, a cruel smile on her face. She knelt beside the exhausted Amaomi and whispered, "Now you see, you cannot defeat me." As she stretched her hand toward Amaomi's chest to claim her heart, Amaomi summoned her last ounce of strength. She pulled out the dagger forged with the dwarf's blood and plunged it into the queen's chest. Queen Beni let out a piercing scream, stumbling backward. She screeched like a banshee as her body began to twist and contort. The dark magic that had sustained her began to unravel, revealing her true form. An old, ugly woman with hollow eyes and wrinkled skin. Abeni lay on the ground, gasping for breath, her power slipping away. Amaomi stood over her, her hands trembling, but her eyes fierce. "This is for my father," she whispered. With one swift motion, Amaomi raised her sword and cut off the head of the evil queen. Queen Abeni's reign of terror was finally over. At dawn, the kingdom of Oro awakened to a world transformed. The once withered plants bloomed with vibrant life, and the dark clouds that had loomed over the kingdom for so long brightened. It was as if the very breath of evil had been washed away, and the land itself sighed in relief. Villagers began to gather, drawn by a sense of hope they hadn't felt in years. Whispers filled the air as they moved toward the palace, eager to discover what had happened during the long, tumultuous night. On the palace balcony, Amaomi stood tall with Igobi by her side, his arm wrapped protectively around her waist. The villagers looked up, their hearts pounding with anticipation and confusion. Amaomi raised her hand high. In it, she held the head of the evil Queen Beni. At first, the crowd fell into a stunned silence, their eyes wide with disbelief. But as they recognized the twisted, lifeless face of their tormentor, a roar of triumph erupted. "At last, the evil queen is gone!" someone shouted. Cheers echoed through the streets, and the people of Oro wept tears of joy, embracing one another as the weight of their suffering finally lifted. Days later, Amaomi was crowned Queen of Oro in a grand ceremony filled with music, laughter, and heartfelt celebration. The kingdom sparkled with new life, and the people rejoiced, knowing that a just and kind ruler now sat upon the throne. As Amaomi stood radiant in her royal attire, Igobi walked up to her amidst the cheers of the crowd. Without hesitation, he pulled her close and kissed her passionately, sealing their bond before the people who had come to love and respect them both. Under Queen Amaomi's reign, the kingdom of Oro flourished. The people lived in peace and plenty. Their days were filled with happiness and prosperity. The wounds left by Queen Beni's cruelty slowly healed, replaced by hope and unity. And as for Queen Amaomi and Igobi, they ruled together with wisdom and love, their hearts forever entwined, and they lived happily ever after. If you enjoyed the story and would like to see more interesting stories, please consider subscribing to this channel, not forgetting to turn on your bell notification icon so that once another video is being posted, you will be the first to be notified. You can also check out these videos here. I promise you won't be disappointed. Till we meet again in my next video, remain blessed.